Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. And this is a missing person segment. Now, a lot of you have said, Dave, when are you going to be in my area? Because I want to come see you talk. Well, I'm humbled that anybody wants to see me, so thanks for those kind words. But it's a difficult time for me to get away, and flights and things, it takes away from research, takes away from family. So the perfect situation is coming up on October 8th of this year. We have Montana Con, and it's in my backyard. And Joe Hauser from the Montana Vortex and myself have put together probably, I believe, the best group of speakers in the world ever. I'll be speaking. Joe Hauser from the Vortex will be speaking. Ron Moorhead, who wrote Quantum Bigfoot. And I spent a week with Ron up at his property at the Sierra Camp. Scott Nelson, who I also spent a week with him up at the Sierra Camp. Tom Powell, probably one of the best speakers in the world on any crypto topic. John Dover, he's a Navajo Ranger, retired. He's going to talk about Native American beliefs. He is a Native American, and he investigated Bigfoot, UFOs, etc. on the Navajo property. And Jim Myers, who owns Bigfoot Shop in Bailey, Colorado. Jim's going to be the master of ceremonies, and he's going to talk as well. Absolutely a stacked program. And it's on a 3-day weekend in October, and Sunday, October 8th, is the day we will all be speaking at the Red Lion Hotel in Kalispell. Get your tickets now. And freeze frame this. That's the QR code. You can freeze frame it, put your phone over it, put your camera on it, and it'll go through. If you just want a link to buy tickets, that's the link. Freeze frame that and copy it. There are still tickets available for Sunday, and get in there early. It's a 3-day weekend. It's Kalispell won't have a ton of people in this time of the year. That's why we did it. And you'll really see how nice northern Montana is. It's idyllic. And the Red Lion is probably the best facility to have this. So that's why we did it. If you have any questions, you can send them to me at CanAm Missing, C-A-N as in Nora, A-M as in Mary, like Canadian American, CanAm Missing at yahoo.com. And had a lot of questions just lately about our latest documentary, Missing 411, The UFO Connection. A lot of people say, Dave, what's the biggest epiphany you've had in the last couple of years? That documentary. And Missing 411, The Hunted, our other documentary. You can watch them all on Amazon. But we never thought we'd go the way we did with that. And it wasn't an easy path. It was, we actually kicked and screamed trying to figure out a way to avoid it, but you just can't. And we came up with a series of facts that I think are stunning. And if you watch it, please leave a review at Amazon. It would really help us. And if you want our books, do not buy them on Amazon. You'll pay over $100 a piece sometimes, $25 on our site. And our site is NA like North America, NABigfootsearch.com. NA like North America, NABigfootsearch.com. Go to the company store and you can get the DVDs, books, etc. Now, every once in a while, we'll do some research and we'll walk away shaking our head thinking, what did we just find? And that's kind of what this is about today. This is only one story. It's going to encompass the entire program. And it involves a girl that disappeared in 1909. And you think, oh, Dave, this is an old story. This is going to be garbage. One of the best stories I've ever researched personally. And even 100 years later, it still has people scratching their heads. And the story deals with an 8-year-old girl named Olive Dupras. Lived in Ontario, Canada. You know, some of you may think, well, how is that relevant till today? You're going to see. She lived in Fort Williams, Ontario, which is now Thunder Bay. And her dad had her and her sister, Sybil, attending a school in St. Pierre, Manitoba. And the school was going to be off for the summer. So the school took the girls to Winnipeg, put them on the CPR train that was going to take them to Thunder Bay. Pretty safe travel, you'd think. No problems. Well, the train stopped about 30 miles east of Kenora and was awaiting orders to pass a large sinkhole that had happened. So the conductor walked down the train. It had several people in it. And he got to the girls and he said, hey, I want you two to sit on the train. We don't know how long we're going to be here, but just sit there. So Winnipeg would be back over here. The train was running eastbound. The incident, about 30 miles east of Kenora. This is Kenora. This is about where the incident happened. This was their destination down at Thunder Bay. Now, I did all I can trying to find this place where they stopped. It was described as a little tiny train station called Pine. And they said there really wasn't much there. On the other side of the station was a lake. The conductor stopped the train there on orders of the train organization because of the sinkhole. He walks to the girls, tells them to sit there. Well, in the meantime, the stop was a little longer than they thought. And so people started to get off the train just to stretch their legs. And Olive got off the train to stretch her legs at 8 years old. And her sister was 11, who was kind of the boss. Said, Olive, you need to stay on the train. You know, the conductor said we need to be on the train. So she was standing right outside the train, right outside of Sybil's window, and she was standing on a rock. And on the other side of that rock was thick forest. So Sybil is saying, hey, you need to get back on the train, blah, blah, blah. She says, okay, if you're going to stay right there, I'm going to go use the bathroom, you stay right there. Olive says, okay. Sybil comes back in a couple minutes and Olive is gone. Well, Sybil started crying because she couldn't find her sister. And the conductor came back and saw Sybil and said, what's wrong? Said, my sister got off the train and I can't find her. So the conductor stops everybody, walks through the train, counts the passengers, figures out that Olive is gone, and organizes a search party with the people on the train. And they were still holding the train. And if you can imagine this is one of the most remote areas in this part of Canada. There's really nothing out there. And for this little girl to disappear here, that was huge. So the first thing they started to do was they blew the whistle every 5 minutes, trying to attract Olive's attention to get her back to the train. Well, that wasn't working. So the people on the train started to go into the woods. And they knew to go into the woods because nobody on the platform had seen Olive cross that area. So they didn't think that she had gone into the lake area behind the platform. So a couple of the male passengers made their way about 3 miles into the woods, and they found a bundle of freshly picked flowers and one possible small footprint. The footprint was about 1.5 miles from the train. Now, the original thought was that Olive got off the train because there were so many pretty flowers in this area, in June. Again, this happened on June 18th, 1909. Well, as they found the flowers, the only thing that the men thought was this had to be the little girl that did this. So they started to yell her name. "Hey, Olive, where are you?" They weren't getting a response. And they did this for over an hour, searching that area. They eventually made it back to the train in about 3 or 4 hours. They'd now been sitting on that train for 6 hours, everybody. And the conductor had to make a tough call, whether to hold the train more and risk holding up more trains behind him, or just moving on. Well, the word got out in the community that a little girl was missing off the train. And so there were loggers and others that were in that area that started to search. And the conductor on train number 96 from Winnipeg to Thunder Bay left Olive behind and took off towards Thunder Bay after a 6-hour delay. Friends, can you imagine? Sybil's now sitting on this train at 11 years old with a bunch of strangers, and her sister is gone. I mean, gone. Imagine what's playing in her head. I can't even imagine. Well, at about 3:30 a.m., the train pulls into Thunder Bay. And Mr. Dupraw is there with a couple of the daughters. Now, there were 9 daughters in the family and 1 son. When Mr. Dupraw sees just Sybil come off the train, he's fanatical. Where's Olive? The conductor comes over and calms him down and explains what happened. Well, he was upset. Mr. Dupraw immediately, even in the middle of the night, summoned his son-in-law, a man named William Higgins, and said, "Hey, we have to leave for Pine ASAP." Well, the railroad knew the urgency behind the issue, so they got that train turned around in a hurry. And then he was given a briefing about what he was going to go into. He had to go home, pack a bag, get some outdoor clothes, dropped everything in his life, had somebody look after his family, because his wife had left him a couple years earlier. So he was raising these 9 girls and 1 boy by himself. When he gets to Pine, this is what he's faced with. Extremely dense tamarack, spruce, muskeg, and swamps. People described it as you stepping into those woods, and if you're 10 feet in, they can't see you. Nobody can see you. When the men arrived, loggers were in the process of still searching for Olive. And they stopped him, and he tried to understand what might have happened to his daughter. And he said, "What kind of wild beasts are out here?" And they said, "Well, in the past we've had bears, wolves, etc. But in the last month there hasn't been any." And they kind of were stunned to say that. Like nobody would believe them. But there really had been nothing in the last month in that area, which really had my thoughts perked up. Why in the last month would there be nothing in this area? But on June 20th, search and rescue was formalized, and 3 mining camps within 50 miles had come to this location, along with 2 railroad outfits and 150 total searchers. This was pretty phenomenal, because you have this extremely remote area, and a missing 8-year-old girl was able to attract 150 searchers? Unbelievable. Well, they were trying to go back as far as 10 miles into the woods. They had some issues with getting food, water, etc. into this little community of Pine. And the CPR Railroad was helping organize all of this effort. On the 21st of June, This was just 3 days after Olive disappeared. He asked that the lake on the other side of the station house be blown up and emptied, just to prove to everybody that Olive wasn't in that lake deceased. Well, they did it. Took them a day, and they searched it for a day. She wasn't in it, which kind of fit the scenario that was being played out by the locals. She wasn't here. Well, the men did make it back 10 miles. And at this point, the Kenora RCMP had heard about this, had responded, and actually brought out bloodhounds from Winnipeg. And they were on scene. They searched. They weren't picking up a scent. And the Kenora RCMP leader told Mr. Dupraw, if he could afford it, to put up a couple $100 reward to keep people in the field searching, because a lot of them were away from work. Mr. Dupraw said, no problem. He put up a $200 reward through the CPR railroad, and he kept local searchers in there for days. $200 was a lot of money back then. Well, the CPR railroad was now organizing the search, and they were focusing on near where the flowers were found by the railroad searchers that first day. And as Mr. Dupraw was in that area, he found something very unusual. He and Mr. Higgins were hiking, and they came upon a tree, and tied on the tree with some weeds was a newspaper account from Winnipeg. And written on the side margin was something that they couldn't read. They thought it might have been some foreign language, but they thought it was odd because this was where Olive had come from. Could she have left some note that they didn't understand, or did somebody else leave a note, or what was this about? They didn't know. They did make a note to searchers that there was absolutely tons of mosquitoes and sandflies that were driving searchers nuts. Let me tell you, friends, I've spent a lot of time in northern Canada, specifically the Yukon. And until you see mosquitoes so bad that they look like a cloud 10 feet off the ground, you have no idea how they can drive you absolutely batty. Even with the strongest mosquito repellent, they still can drive you crazy. But searchers kept pushing on. And then, about a mile from where they found this note, Mr. Dupraw and Higgins found a handkerchief that they thought was from Olive, about 4 miles from the train. So now they found two things. The newspaper, which they weren't sure. Other people found the flowers, and now they find this handkerchief. Well, there was a lot of rumors that were floating around. Like, what could have happened to Olive? Well, the press started to ask Mr. Dupraw about his relationship with his wife. And he said, I don't have a wife. She left me 2 years earlier. Well, then there were some that suspected maybe they might have kidnapped Olive. But that was so remote of a chance. She was seen outside the train by her sister. She wasn't on the train. How are you going to get her out of the middle of nowhere on an abduction scenario? There were no cars in the area. There was just the train that was used for transportation. If they wanted to get back to Winnipeg, they'd have to wait for the next train to go up. It was like 1,000,000 to 1 shot, and nobody was really taking that seriously. But still, that was brought up. Now, a constable from Kenora came out and started to take organization of the search and rescue. And he made a statement to the press that, quote, the facts here are mysterious. I would agree. So the search and rescue continued formally until June 30th, along with that reward. And in this part of Ontario, it actually continued to be a big issue for years into the future, because such a little girl vanished in the middle of nowhere without an adequate explanation of what happened. Her sister even said that she couldn't believe that she would walk into those woods. But maybe because the flowers were so beautiful, she went in to pick some. Maybe. There was a psychic at the time that stated, this was a couple years later, that Olive was living with a man in Spain. No one could make much of that. But fast forward 28 years, May 11th, 1936, a Winnipeg farmer wrote a note to the RCMP anonymously, and he sent a photo of a young girl. Supposedly it was Olive when she was younger. And she said, the farmer said Olive was alive, won't say where, just tell the family she's okay. Well, this is the photo the RCMP got. Now, the sisters and the family always said Olive was a beautiful young girl. And when the sisters saw this, they realized that it was a much older photo of Olive. But they all agreed it must be her. They said they just had a hunch it was her. They couldn't prove it. But the 9 sisters and 1 brother, a couple of them were interviewed in 1940. And they said that just in their gut, they believed Olive was still alive. And many believed that the photo was Olive. Now, in many, many missing persons cases, the family always has a gut belief that the victim is still alive. And I think it's human nature to always hope for the best. And in this case, I really doubt that the picture was of Olive, or that Olive could be alive, because all of the evidence pointed to those flowers 3 miles into the woods were hers. She had picked them. Because who else would be in the middle of the woods that deep picking flowers? It just made no sense. And the little print that they found in the woods thought it was a small child. All of that made sense. What doesn't make sense is that why she went into the woods. Number 1. Number 2, why wouldn't she respond to calls of the people on the train or the whistle of the train? The whistle was a great idea because a child can follow that whistle back to the train yard. I think the hardest decision in this whole event was the conductor making a decision to leave after 6 hours. I think if I would have made that decision, it would have haunted me for the rest of my life, knowing that possibly if I would have stayed and had more people searching, that I could have found that girl. Mr. Dupraw and Sybil had to live with those memories, and I'm sure Sybil had guilt in her heart that she allowed, in her heart, she might be allowed her sister to just walk away. It wasn't her fault. Get that? I know it wasn't Sybil's fault, but people just have guilt like that. This is one of those stories where they bring canines in. Bloodhounds never pick up a scent. How is that possible? Where did Olive go? And if this was Olive Dupras, where was she living and where was this picture taken? And how did she get out of Pine, out of that very remote train station? We'll never know. All of her siblings are deceased. Her dad died many years ago. The brothers and sisters are gone. There may be a Dupraw out there that's a relative of one of the deceased brothers or sisters. Just want to let you know that we're going to keep pushing the story because I'm interested to know what really happened here. But in the meantime, if you like the story, give it 2 thumbs up. Please watch our channel. Please make sure you're subscribed. And I hope I see you in Kalispell, Montana, October 8th of this year for MontanaCon. In the meantime, be nice to people. If you're out in society, do something nice for somebody. It costs nothing. And we need to be nicer to each other. Lastly, just recently, a huge series of fires blew through the Hawaiian Islands. And Maui has always been an important place to my bigger family. My sister had a house in Maui for a long time. We used to vacation there with her. And I know a lot of her friends got their homes destroyed. Lahaina got destroyed. These people were not wealthy people. And I hope and I pray they can get back on their feet quickly. And I hope they know that we care about them. Take care, folks. Paulides out.